I stood in the center of the driveway, the smell of fresh sawdust thick in the air, stinging my nose like vinegar. My hands were trembling, not from age, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice water in my veins. For 40 years, the south wall of my home had been covered in a cascading waterfall of purple wisteria. My late wife Martha had planted it the week we moved in. It was her pride, her joy, and the background of every anniversary photo we had ever taken. Now, it was gone. In its place stood a jagged, weeping stump, hacked apart with zero skill. Behind it, two contractors were drilling brackets into the century-old brick to mount a glossy, neon-pink plastic panel. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, walked out onto the terrace. She didn't look guilty, she looked annoyed that I was home early. She took a sip of her iced oat milk latte and gestured vaguely at the destruction with a manicured hand. "It was crawling with bees, Thomas," she said, her voice dripping with that condescending sweetness she used when speaking to me. It was messy, and honestly, it looked like a haunted house. "I need clean lines for my Morning Glow brand partnership. The pink is going to pop on camera." I looked at my son David. He was standing by the back door, studying his shoes, refusing to meet my eyes. He knew. He knew that vine was the last living piece of his mother left in this garden. He knew, and he let her cut it down for a backdrop. Jessica sighed, checking her reflection in her phone screen. "Don't look so tragic, it's just a plant. We're doing you a favor by modernizing this place." I felt the ghost of Martha's hand on my shoulder, steadying me. I remembered the red leather binder she had left in the safe deposit box, the one marked for a rainy day. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I didn't tell them that the wisteria was a protected heritage plant listed on the historical registry, or that the fine for removing it was more than David's annual salary. I just smoothed the front of my jacket, looked Jessica in the eye, and smiled. "Okay," I said softly. "It looks very bright." Jessica smirked at David. "See? I told you he wouldn't care. He's too out of it to notice." She turned her back to me to direct the contractors. She had no idea that she had just signed her own eviction notice. I walked past them, up the stone steps that I had laid with my own hands 30 years ago, and into the cool shadow of the kitchen. The sound of the drill biting into the exterior brick vibrated through the floorboards, a jarring, mechanical scream that made my teeth ache. David followed me inside. I could hear his footsteps, hesitant and shuffling, like a child who knows he has broken a vase, but hopes no one will notice if he stays quiet. "Dad, look," he started, his voice cracking slightly. "I know you like that vine, but Jessica has this huge opportunity. This sponsorship could really put her channel on the map. We need the money. The upkeep on this place it's a lot." I turned to the sink and filled a glass of water. My reflection in the window above the faucet looked older than I felt. Gray hair, deep lines etched around the eyes, but the eyes themselves were sharp. They were Martha's eyes. "I like that vine," I repeated, my voice steady. "David, your mother held your hand under that vine when you took your first steps. We toasted champagne under it when you graduated. It wasn't just a plant, it was the calendar of our lives." David flinched, running a hand through his thinning hair. He looked so tired. He was only 35, but marriage to Jessica seemed to have aged him in dog years. "I know, Dad, I know, but you have to understand. Jessica feels stifled here. She says the house feels like a museum. She just wants to make it ours." Ours. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and false. I took a slow sip of water. "I see," I said. "Well, I suppose change is inevitable." David let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. His shoulders slumped in relief. "Thanks, Dad. I told her you'd be reasonable. She was worried you'd blow up. I told her, Dad's cool, he's low maintenance." Low maintenance. That's what I had become. A piece of furniture that occasionally needed dusting, but mostly just needed to stay out of the frame. "I'm going to my study, David," I said, setting the glass down. I have some reading to do. I walked down the hallway, the sound of Jessica's laughter drifting in from the terrace. She was probably filming a before and after video, framing the destruction of my wife's legacy as a brave, aesthetic choice. I entered my study and locked the door. This room was the only place in the house Jessica hadn't colonized yet. It smelled of old paper, cedar, and the faint, lingering scent of lavender, Martha's perfume. I sat at the heavy oak desk, the same desk where Martha had practiced law for 40 years. She had been a force of nature, a brilliant estate attorney who could dissect a contract with the precision of a surgeon. She loved David fiercely, but she was not blind. 3 years ago, when David brought Jessica home for the first time, Martha had pulled me aside later that night. "Thomas," she had said, her face serious, "that girl doesn't look at David. She looks at his watch. She looks at the furniture. She looks at the square footage." I had told her she was being cynical. I told her to give them a chance. Martha had shaken her head. "I hope I'm wrong, but as a lawyer, I never plan for the best-case scenario. I plan for the disaster." I opened the small safe concealed behind the row of architectural encyclopedias on the bottom shelf. The dial turned smoothly under my fingers, left to 10, right to 24, left to 58, the date we met. Inside sat the red binder. I pulled it out. It was heavy. The label on the spine was written in Martha's impeccable cursive. The Rainy Day Protocol. I opened it. The first page was a letter addressed to me. "My dearest Thomas, if you are reading this, I am gone. And if you have opened this particular binder, it means my fears were founded. It means that the person David married has mistaken your kindness for weakness and your silence for surrender. I know you, my love. I know you will try to keep the peace. You will endure insults to your dignity because you love our son. You will let them chip away at you because you don't want to be the difficult old man. But there is a line, and if they have crossed it, if they have damaged the soul of this home, then you must stop being the gentle gardener and become the storm. The house is not just a house, Thomas. It is a trust, and trusts have rules. Read tab 4, the Preservation Covenant. Love always, Martha." I turned to tab 4. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, terms I had heard Martha use over dinner 1,000 times, but never fully appreciated until now. Clause 12B. The property located at 4400 River Road is designated as a private heritage trust. The trustee, Thomas Vance, is granted a life estate. Clause 12C, revocation of tenancy. The beneficiaries, David Vance and spouse, are granted quiet enjoyment solely at the discretion of the trustee. However, any material alteration to the key heritage assets without the written consent of the Historical Preservation Board constitutes an immediate breach of the occupancy agreement. I flipped to the addendum titled List of Key Heritage Assets. There at the very top of the list, clearly defined and protected under the bylaws of the trust. 1. The South Wall Wisteria, Wisteria sinensis, planted 1984. Martha hadn't just planted a vine, she had legally weaponized it. I sat back in my chair, the binder open in front of me. Outside, the drilling had stopped, replaced by the sound of Jessica's voice. She was shouting at one of the workers. "Careful with that panel. Do you know how much that cost? It's imported." She was worried about a plastic panel. She didn't realize that by cutting down that vine, she had essentially triggered a legal landmine that would blow her entire life apart. The Historical Preservation Board wasn't some city department. It was a private board Martha had set up, consisting of her 3 most ruthless lawyer friends. They hated 2 things: bad contracts and people who disrespected Martha Vance. I could call them now. I could end this today. But as I looked at the picture of David on my desk, a photo of him at 7 years old, grinning with a mouthful of missing teeth, I hesitated. If I pulled the trigger now, David would be collateral damage. He was weak, yes. He was a coward, yes. But he was my son. I had to give him a chance to see Jessica for what she was. I had to let the rot spread just enough for him to smell it. I closed the binder and placed it back in the safe, but I didn't lock it. I left the door slightly ajar. I wasn't going to call the lawyers yet, not today. Jessica wanted to play head of household? Fine, I would let her play. I would let her feel the intoxicating rush of total control. I would let her bring her parents in. I would let her paint the world pink. I would wait until she felt completely safe, completely untouchable. And then, when she was standing at the very top of the mountain she thought she had conquered, I would pull the ground out from under her feet. I stood up, adjusted my tie, and walked to the window. The pink panel was up. It was garish, hideous, and an affront to everything this house represented. I touched the cold glass. "Okay, Martha," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's see what they do next." The invasion didn't happen with a bang. It happened with the beep of a reversing delivery truck. 3 days after the Wisteria was murdered, I was sitting in the kitchen, nursing a cup of black coffee and watching the morning light filter through the window. I had always loved this time of day. It was the only time the house felt like mine again. Then, the beeping started. I walked to the front window. A large rental van was backing into the driveway, tires crunching over the gravel. Behind it, a beige sedan pulled up, honking rhythmically. Shave and a haircut, 2 bits. Jessica came bounding down the stairs, wearing a silk robe that I'm fairly certain she had charged to David's credit card. "They're here," she squealed, clapping her hands. "Who is here?" I asked, though a sinking feeling in my gut told me I already knew the answer. "My parents," she said, ignoring the tightness in my jaw. "Stan and Brenda. They're going to stay for a little while, just to help with the transition. You know, with the renovation and everything. I need the emotional support. Plus, Mom is a wizard at organizing. She's going to help me declutter." Declutter. That was a dangerous word. In Jessica's vocabulary, it usually meant throwing away anything that predated 2010. Before I could respond, the front door swung open. Stan, a man who looked like a sun-dried tomato in cargo shorts, marched in carrying a cooler. "Honey, we're home," he bellowed, dropping the cooler onto the antique Persian rug in the foyer. Brenda followed, carrying a terrified-looking Pomeranian. She looked around the hallway, wrinkling her nose. "Smells like old wood in here. We'll need to get some diffusers." Jessica hugged them both, casting a glance at me. "Dad, you remember Stan and Brenda, right?" I remembered them. The last time I saw them was at the wedding, where Stan had gotten drunk and tried to fight the bartender, and Brenda had asked Martha if her pearls were real. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I didn't know you were visiting." "Oh, we're not just visiting, Tom," Stan said, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "We're pitching in. Jessica says you guys are drowning in space here. Figured we'd fill up the empty rooms, hey?" I looked at David, who had just come down the stairs. He looked exhausted. He was already dressed for work, tie askew. "David?" I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, Dad, we talked about it. It's just for a few weeks, until they, get settled. They're renting out their place in Florida for the season." I looked at the 3 of them, the invaders and the traitor. They occupied the space with such casual arrogance. Stan was already opening the fridge. Brenda was letting the dog run loose in the living room. "Okay," I said. Jessica blinked. "Just, okay?" I smiled, a thin, papery smile. Family is family, right? I could see the relief wash over David. He thought I was capitulating. He thought I was too old to care. But the real blow came that evening. I was reading in the living room, or trying to. The television was blaring a reality show, and Stan was snoring on the sofa, his bare feet propped up on the coffee table Martha had restored by hand. Jessica walked in, holding a clipboard. She looked like a general surveying a battlefield. "Thomas, we need to talk about sleeping arrangements," she said. I put down my book. "Oh, yeah, see, Mom and Dad have bad backs. The guest mattress is too soft, and David and I need the master suite for the filming lighting. So, we were thinking." She paused, waiting for me to make it easy for her. I didn't. I just stared at her. She cleared her throat. "We were thinking the basement suite would be perfect for you. It's darker, so you'll sleep better. And it's got that separate entrance so you can come and go without, disturbing the flow." The basement. It was a finished basement, technically, a guest suite, but it was underground. It was cold, and it was symbolic. They were literally pushing me down, out of sight, into the foundation. David was standing in the doorway, pretending to check his emails on his phone. "David?" I asked again. "You want me to move into the basement? In my own house?" He looked up, pained. "Dad, it's just temporary. Just while Stan and Brenda are here, please. Don't make this a thing." I looked at the red binder in my mind. Clause 14, tenant rights. The life tenant has exclusive right to the primary dwelling. Moving me to the basement was a demotion. It was a violation of the spirit of the trust. But more importantly, it was the perfect trap. If I fought them, they would be on guard. They would be careful. But if I went downstairs, if I became the invisible man, they would forget I was there. And people who think they are unobserved make mistakes. Big ones. I stood up slowly, feigning a stiffness in my knees. "You know," I said, looking around at the chaos, the dog hair on the rug, the cooler in the hall, the blaring TV, "the basement is very quiet." Jessica beamed. "Exactly, it's a sanctuary." I nodded. "All right, I'll move my things tonight." "You're the best, Thomas," she said, already turning back to her mother. I spent the next 2 hours carrying my clothes and a few boxes down the stairs. David didn't offer to help. He sat at the kitchen table, laughing at something Stan was saying. When I finally closed the door to the basement suite, the silence was heavy. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked up at the ceiling. I could hear their footsteps thumping above me. I could hear the muffled sound of their laughter. They thought they had buried me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the app connected to the smart home security system, a system David had installed a year ago and forgotten about. He had given me the admin password because he was too busy to manage the notifications. I tapped the screen. Camera 1, living room, live. Camera 2, kitchen, live. Camera 3, terrace, live. On the screen, I watched Jessica pour a glass of wine and spin around in the center of the kitchen. "It's practically ours now," she said, her voice clear through the microphone. "He's such a pushover." Stan laughed, grabbing a handful of nuts from a bowl. "Good, I never liked that guy anyway, too uptight." I watched them. I listened. And then I opened the Notes app on my phone and started a new log. Day 4, unauthorized. Occupants, displaced from primary bedroom. Hostile environment. I wasn't sleeping in a dungeon. I was sleeping in a command center. 2 weeks later, the day of the Morning Glow launch party arrived. The vibrations started at noon. It wasn't just sound. It was a physical thrumming that shook the dust off the exposed pipes in my basement ceiling. They were testing the sound system. I had spent the last fortnight living like a ghost in my own home. I used the side entrance. I made coffee only when I knew the kitchen was empty. I avoided Stan, who had taken to walking around the house in his underwear, and Brenda, who criticized my dusty old books every time she saw me. But tonight was different. Tonight was the night Jessica officially launched her lifestyle brand. The house, my house, Martha's house, was the stage. I put on my best suit. It was a charcoal 3-piece I had bought in Milan 10 years ago. I shaved. I combed my hair. I wasn't going to hide in the basement while strangers trampled my garden. I was going to attend. I was the host, after all. I walked up the stairs, the bass from the music getting louder with every step. When I opened the door to the kitchen, I was met with a wall of chaotic energy. Caterers were shouting orders. Trays of hors d'oeuvres were being assembled with surgical precision. And there was Jessica. She looked stunning, I had to admit. She was wearing a shimmering champagne dress that caught the light, her hair styled in perfect, loose waves. She was barking orders at a terrified assistant. No, the napkins need to be morning glow peach, not salmon. God, can anyone do anything right? She spun around and saw me. Her face fell. Thomas, she said, her voice tight, what are you doing? I adjusted my cuffs. I'm coming to the party, Jessica. It is in my garden. She marched over to me, grabbing my arm and pulling me into the pantry. The smell of expensive cheese and anxiety was overwhelming. You can't, she hissed. Look at you. You're wearing a suit. This is a boho chic casual event. You look like a funeral director. You're going to kill the vibe. I'm the owner of this house, I said calmly. Jessica laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. You're the life tenant, Thomas, and right now you're interfering with my work. This isn't a family barbecue. This is a business launch. Important people are coming. Investors, influencers. I can't have you wandering around telling boring stories about trees. She looked me up and down, her eyes narrowing. If you insist on being out there, you need to make yourself useful. We're down a server because the agency messed up. She reached for a tray of empty champagne flutes sitting on the counter and shoved it into my hands. If anyone asks, you're helping the catering team. Do not talk to the guests. Just take the glasses and stay in the background. Please, Thomas, for David's sake, don't embarrass him. I looked down at the tray in my hands. I looked at the woman who had married my son. I could have thrown the tray. I could have shouted. But I remembered the red binder. I remembered the strategy. Let them think you are weak. Let them think they have won. Okay, I said softly. I'll help. Jessica let out a sigh of relief. Thank God. Just try to look less gloomy. I walked out into the garden, and for a moment, my heart stopped. It was unrecognizable. The wisteria was gone, of course, but the desecration went further. They had installed a raised platform over Martha's rose beds. The ancient stone path, laid by my grandfather, was covered in cheap, synthetic turf to make it heel-friendly. And there, dominating the entire south wall, was the pink panel. It was illuminated by floodlights. The words "Morning Glow" were written in neon script. It was bright, plastic, and soulless. It looked like a billboard for a cheap nightclub had crash-landed in an English country garden. The guests began to arrive. They were young, beautiful, and loud. They took selfies against the pink wall. They didn't look at the trees. They didn't notice the architecture. They only looked at themselves in the screens of their phones. I moved through the crowd collecting empty glasses. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. Stan was holding court near the bar. He was wearing a linen suit that was too tight, a cigar clamped between his teeth. Great place, right? He was saying to a young man with a camera. Kept it in the family. We're thinking of putting a pool in next year. Right over there. He pointed to the spot where Martha's ashes were scattered, beneath the old oak tree. I gripped the tray so hard my knuckles turned white. I forced myself to keep walking. Then I saw David. He was standing near the DJ booth, holding a drink, looking uncomfortable. He saw me approaching. He saw the tray in my hand. He saw his father, the man who had put him through college, the man who had taught him how to ride a bike, serving drinks to his wife's shallow friends. He didn't come over to help me. He didn't take the tray. He looked down at his phone and pretended to text. That was the moment. That was the cut. I was no longer waiting for David to wake up. I was no longer hoping he would find his spine. He had made his choice. He was one of them. Excuse me? I turned. A woman in a large hat was holding out a dirty napkin. Could you take this and bring me another Chardonnay? I looked at her. I looked at the napkin. I took it. Certainly, madam, I said. As I turned to head back to the kitchen, a hush fell over the crowd near the stage. Jessica had grabbed the microphone. "Welcome, everyone," she shouted, beaming. The crowd cheered. Phones went up, a sea of glowing rectangles recording her triumph. "I am so incredibly proud to welcome you to the Morning Glow headquarters," she announced, spreading her arms wide. "It has been a dream of mine to transform this space. When we moved in, this garden was, well, let's just say it was stuck in the past. It was overgrown, dark, and depressing." I stopped moving. I stood in the shadow of the house, listening. "But with a little vision and a lot of hard work, we've cleared out the dead weight," she continued, gesturing to the spot where the wisteria used to be. "We've opened it up to the light. Because that's what Morning Glow is about, shedding the old skin and revealing the new you." The crowd applauded. "And I have to thank my amazing husband, David, for making this possible. And my parents, Stan and Brenda, the real rock stars who help run this estate." She pointed at Stan, who waved his cigar in the air. "She didn't mention me. I wasn't there. I was just the old man with the tray." But then, disaster struck. Or rather, hubris did. Jessica stepped back to pose for a photo against the pink wall. She leaned back, trying to look casual, resting her weight against the plastic panel. The contractors, the ones she had hired because they were cheap and fast, hadn't drilled the anchors into the brick deep enough. The century-old mortar was crumbly. It needed specialized care, not brute force. There was a loud crack. The top bracket pulled free from the wall. The giant neon sign swung forward. Jessica screamed. She scrambled out of the way just as the heavy plastic panel crashed down onto the terrace, shattering the neon tubes. A cloud of pink glass and dust puffed into the air. The Morning Glow sign now lay face down in the dirt, flickering and buzzing like a dying insect. The music stopped. The crowd gasped. Jessica stood there, trembling, her perfect dress dusted with plaster. She looked furious. She looked around, desperate for someone to blame. Her eyes landed on me. "Thomas!" she shrieked. The crowd turned, hundreds of eyes fixed on me. "You!" she yelled, pointing a shaking finger. "You loosened it! I saw you near the wall earlier. You're trying to sabotage me." It was a lie. A blatant, desperate lie to save face in front of her investors. She needed a villain, and I was the convenient prop. David stepped forward. "Jessica, calm down." "Shut up, David," she snapped. "He's been jealous of this project since day one. Look at him, he's smiling." I wasn't smiling, but I wasn't cowering either. I set the tray of glasses down on a table. The clink of crystal was the only sound in the silent garden. I walked toward her. The crowd parted for me. I stopped 5 feet away, looking at the shattered sign, then at the hole in the wall where the bracket had ripped out a chunk of brick. "I didn't loosen it, Jessica," I said, my voice projecting clearly without shouting. "That wall is Victorian brick. It breathes. You can't drill tension bolts into it without a stabilizer. Any architect knows that." I looked at the influencers, the investors, the cameras that were still rolling. "You didn't clear out the dead weight," I said, gesturing to the stump behind the broken sign. "You removed the structural integrity. The wisteria roots were holding that soil together. You hacked them out, and the ground shifted." I looked her dead in the eye. "You built your brand on a foundation you didn't understand, and now it has collapsed." Jessica's face went red. "Get out," she hissed. "Get out of my sight. Go back to your basement." I nodded. "As you wish." I turned and walked away. As I reached the door, David grabbed my arm. His grip was weak, his palms sweaty. "Dad, wait. You can't just leave her like that. Help me fix the sign, please. Everyone is watching." I looked at his hand on my sleeve. I gently peeled his fingers off, one by one. "I am not the maintenance man, David," I said. "I am the landlord, and you have damaged the property." I walked into the house, leaving them in the ruins of their party. I went straight to my study. I locked the door. I opened the safe. I took out the red binder. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for Martha's law partner, a man named Arthur Sterling, who had been waiting for this call for 8 months. "Arthur," I said when he picked up. "Thomas, is everything all right?" "No," I said, watching the live feed on my phone as Jessica screamed at the caterers to clean up the mess. "It's time to invoke Clause 12. See, there was a pause on the other end. Then I heard the smile in Arthur's voice. "I'll have the paperwork filed by morning." I hung up. The party outside was dying, the vibe destroyed. But in the quiet of my study, the real work was just beginning. The morning after the party, the house felt like a battlefield after a ceasefire. The air was thick with the smell of stale alcohol and aggressive cleaning products. The morning glow sign lay in a heap on the patio, covered by a tarp, like a body awaiting the coroner. I spent the morning in the basement, listening to the footsteps above. I knew exactly what they were doing. They were doing damage control. Jessica was likely on her phone, spinning the narrative to her followers, blaming the unsafe conditions of the house, casting herself as the survivor of a near tragedy. I checked my watch, 10 a.m. Arthur had told me to sit tight for 48 hours. The trust needed time to assemble the inspection team and file the emergency injunction. In the meantime, I had a role to play. I walked upstairs. The kitchen was a hive of activity. Stan was cooking bacon, grease spattering onto the marble countertops. Brenda was scrolling through an iPad. Jessica sat at the head of the table, looking like a war council general, while David sat beside her, looking pale and hungover. When I entered, the room went silent. Stan stopped chewing. Jessica looked up, her eyes cold. "Well," she said, "look who decided to join the living." I stopped at the edge of the island. I kept my hands clasped in front of me, shoulders slumped. I let my mouth hang slightly open, adopting the posture of a man who has lost his fight. "I wanted to apologize," I said softly. David blinked, surprised. "You do?" "Yes," I continued, looking down at my shoes. "I realized last night I was out of line. This house, it is too much for me. The maintenance, the decisions. I'm an old man. I shouldn't be standing in the way of progress." Jessica narrowed her eyes, searching for the trap. She was predator enough to know when prey was acting strange, but her ego was louder than her instinct. She sat up straighter. "Go on." I walked over to the table. "You were right, Jessica. The wisteria, it was just a plant. I've been holding on to the past too tightly. And last night, pointing out the wall, that was petty. I embarrassed you in front of your guests. I am sorry." David let out a long, shuddering breath. "Dad, thank you. That's all we wanted to hear." Jessica didn't smile yet. She tapped her manicured fingernails on the table. "Apologies are nice, Thomas, but we need structure. If we are going to fix this brand and this house, I need to know you aren't going to sabotage me again. I need full control. No more life tenant interference." She reached into her bag and pulled out a stapled document. It looked like something she had downloaded from a generic legal template site. "I typed this up this morning," she said, sliding it across the table. "It's a household management agreement. It basically says that I am the primary decision maker for all renovations, events, and usage of the common areas. You agree to stay in the basement suite unless invited upstairs. You agree not to speak to contractors, and you agree to sign over the management of the household accounts to David." I looked at the paper. It was legally laughable. The trust deed I held was an ironclad document recorded with the state. This was a piece of printer paper held together by arrogance. Signing it meant absolutely nothing in the eyes of the law. But in the eyes of Jessica, it meant victory. I picked up a pen. "Dad, you don't have to sign it right this second," David mumbled, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. "You can read it over." "No, David," I said, my voice trembling just enough to sell it. "She's right. It's time I step back. I just want peace." I signed my name at the bottom of the page, Thomas Vance. I pushed the paper back to her. Jessica snatched it up, scanning the signature. A slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. "Finally," she said. She looked at Stan. "Dad, crack open the mimosas. We're celebrating." Stan whooped and went to the fridge. "We're back in business, baby." Jessica looked at me, her eyes gleaming. "You know, Thomas, this is for the best. You'll be much happier down there. Less stress. We'll take care of everything." "I know," I said. "Thank you." Stan poured orange juice and cheap champagne into glasses. He handed one to Jessica, one to David, and one to Brenda. He didn't offer me one. "To the new head of household," Stan bellowed. "To the future," Jessica added, clinking her glass against David's. David drank, but he looked at me over the rim of his glass. He looked like he wanted to say something, maybe apologize, maybe thank me, but he didn't. He swallowed the wine and looked away. I stood there for a moment, watching them. They looked so happy. They thought they had just won a kingdom. They had no idea they were toasting on the deck of the Titanic. "I'm going to go rest," I said. "Good idea," Jessica said, already turning back to her phone. "Oh, and Thomas? The contractors are coming back tomorrow to fix the wall. Stay out of their way." "I will," I promised. I walked back to the basement, closing the door softly behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the clock. 24 hours. Tomorrow, the contractors wouldn't be the only ones showing up. The Preservation Board inspector was scheduled for 9 a.m. And unlike Jessica's crew, he wasn't coming to fix a sign. He was coming to condemn a crime. I lay back on the pillow and closed my eyes. The household management agreement was upstairs, filed away in Jessica's binder. The real power, the red binder, was safe in my safe. I had given them their victory. I had let them lower their shields. Now, I just had to wait for the hammer to fall. I left the house at 7 a.m., telling Stan I was going to the pharmacy for my heart medication. He didn't even look up from his plate of eggs. "Bring back some donuts," he grunted. I drove straight to downtown to a building that smelled of old money and silence. Arthur Sterling was waiting for me. He was 70 years old, wore a bow tie without irony, and had been Martha's law partner for 3 decades. He looked at me over the rim of his spectacles as I sat down in the leather chair opposite his desk. "You look tired, Thomas," he said. "I'm living in my own basement, Arthur," I replied, "and I'm currently being ordered around by a woman who thinks shabby chic involves tearing down a 100-year-old vine." Arthur opened a file on his desk. It was thick. "Well," he said, tapping the paper, "she has done us a favor. By documenting the destruction on social media, she has provided irrefutable proof of willful damage to a heritage asset. Martha was very specific about the Wisteria, Thomas. She knew it was the most vulnerable part of the property." He slid a document toward me. "This is the revocation order. Once the inspector confirms the damage, the trust automatically dissolves David and Jessica's right to occupancy. They become trespassers. The sheriff can remove them immediately." He paused, looking at me kindly. "Are you sure you want to do this? It will be messy. David is your son." I looked at the signature line. I thought about the way David had looked at his shoes while Jessica mocked me. I thought about the household management agreement I had signed yesterday. "David made his choice," I said quietly. "He chose the path of least resistance. Now he has to walk it." I didn't sign the order yet. "Send the inspector," I said. "I want them to understand exactly what they destroyed." I returned to the house at 8:45 a.m. The Morning Glow team, Jessica, Stan, and Brenda, were in the driveway. They were arguing with a man standing next to a gray sedan. The man was Mr. Blackwood. He was the chief preservation officer for the trust, a man who cared more about brick, mortar, and root systems than he did about human feelings. He held a clipboard and wore a hard hat that looked pristine. "I told you," Jessica was shouting, clutching her robe tight against the morning chill. "We didn't order an inspection. We have our own contractors coming later to fix the sign. You're trespassing. Mr. Blackwood adjusted his glasses. I am not a contractor, madam. I am here to perform a mandatory audit of the protected assets listed on the deed. I have a report of significant structural alteration. Jessica rolled her eyes. Oh my God, is this about the stupid permit? Look, my husband is an influencer. We bring value to this neighborhood. Just give me the fine ticket so I can pay it and you can leave. David was standing behind her, looking nervous. Jess, maybe we should let him look? If it's the city. It's not the city, David. It's some bureaucrat trying to shake us down. She turned back to Blackwood. Go ahead, look around. You'll see we're improving this dump. I parked my car and walked up the driveway. I didn't say a word. I just stood next to David. Dad, David whispered, do you know this guy? I shrugged, my face a mask of senile confusion. He seems official, David. Better let him do his job. Blackwood didn't acknowledge me. That was part of the protocol. He walked past Jessica and went straight to the south wall. He stood before the stump of the wisteria. He knelt down, touching the jagged cuts where the chainsaw had hacked through the thick, woody trunk. He took out a small camera and snapped 3 photos. Then he looked at the wall where the pink panel had ripped out the brickwork. He took a caliper from his pocket and measured the depth of the hole. Severe masonry trauma, he muttered, writing on his clipboard. Total destruction of Wisteria sinensis, specimen 1984-A. Jessica walked over, sipping her coffee. Yeah, it was full of bugs. We're going to put up a vertical succulent garden there instead. Much more modern. Blackwood stood up slowly. He turned to face her. He wasn't smiling. Madam, he said, his voice dry as dust. You are aware that this vine was a registered biological asset of the Vance Heritage Trust. Its root system was integral to the drainage of the South Terrace. Jessica laughed. Trust? Asset? It's a plant. And this is our house. My husband owns it. Blackwood looked at David. Is that so? You are the title holder? David shifted comfortably. Well, I mean, eventually. My dad is the life tenant, but, we run the place. Blackwood made a note. Usurpation of trustee authority. Noted. He ripped a yellow sheet from his clipboard and handed it to Jessica. What is this? She snapped. That is a notice of irreparable harm, Blackwood said. It serves as the official documentation that the terms of the habitation covenant have been breached. You have altered the property without the consent of the Preservation Board. So? Jessica crumpled the paper. How much is the fine? 500? 1,000? Blackwood looked at me for the first time. His eyes were cold. There is no fine, Mrs. Vance, Blackwood said. The penalty for destroying a Class A heritage asset is the immediate termination of the beneficiary's residency rights. You aren't being fined, you are being evicted. The silence that followed was absolute. A bird chirped in the oak tree, loud and mocking. Jessica stared at him. Her mouth opened, then closed. Evicted? You can't evict us. We live here. Not anymore, Blackwood said. Technically, as of the moment that saw cut through the vine, you became squatters. He turned to me. Mr. Vance, the board will be in touch regarding the restoration costs. We estimate the damage to the brickwork and the sourcing of a replacement mature vine to be in the region of $80,000. Since the damage was caused by unauthorized occupants, the trust will be suing them personally for the amount. 80,000? Stan choked on his coffee. Jessica turned on me, her eyes wild. Thomas, tell him this is ridiculous. I looked at the stump. I looked at the crumbling brick. I don't know, Jessica, I said, my voice trembling with fake worry. He sounds very serious. Martha always did say the house had rules. Rules? She screamed. It's a vine. A stupid, ugly vine. It was a contract, Blackwood interrupted, and you just voided your lease. He tipped his hard hat. Good day. He walked back to his car. Jessica stood there shaking. She turned to David. Fix this. Fix this right now. Call your lawyer. David looked at me. He looked pale. Dad, what is he talking about? What trust? The one your mother set up, I said softly. The one you never bothered to read. You knew, Jessica shrieked, pointing a finger in my face. You knew about this. You set us up. I told you it was a bad idea to cut it, I said, shrugging. But you said I was just an old man who didn't understand clean lines. I turned and walked toward the house. Where are you going? She yelled. To the basement, I said. I need to check my laundry. I suggest you start packing, Jessica. Mr. Blackwood is very efficient. As I walked away, I heard the first real crack in their foundation. You said you checked the deed, David, Jessica screamed. I thought I did, David yelled back. I closed the door to the basement and locked it. I went to the monitor. On the screen, I saw Jessica kicking the stump of the wisteria. She was screaming. But she wasn't screaming at me anymore. She was screaming at the house. And the house, thanks to Martha, was finally fighting back. The next 48 hours in the house were suffocating. The air felt heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up. Jessica was vibrating with a manic energy, alternating between screaming at her phone and aggressively ignoring the elephant in the room. She had convinced herself, and David, that Mr. Blackwood was a fraud. He's just trying to scare us, I heard her telling her mother in the kitchen. I looked him up. The Vance Heritage Trust is just some dusty old filing. They don't have any real power. We have possession. Possession is 9/10 of the law, right? Stan grunted in agreement, shoveling eggs into his mouth. Damn right. Let them sue. It'll take years. Sat in my basement sanctuary, listening to their delusions. They were right about one thing. Lawsuits take years. But they were wrong about the mechanism Martha had built. This wasn't a lawsuit. It was an eviction based on a breach of covenant. It didn't require a trial. It required a sheriff. On the morning of the second day, the postman arrived. I was sweeping the front porch, a chore Jessica insisted I do to earn my keep, when the mail carrier handed me a thick, stiff envelope. It was certified mail, return receipt requested. The return address was Sterling and Associates. I didn't open it. I knew exactly what was inside, the final notice to vacate. I walked into the kitchen and placed the envelope on the counter in front of Jessica. Mail, I said. Jessica glanced at the return address and sneered. She picked it up with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. More garbage from your lawyer friend? She asked. It looks important, Jessica, I said gently. It's certified. It's harassment, she corrected, and I don't have time for bad vibes today. I have a brand integration meeting in an hour. She tossed the unopened envelope onto the pile of junk mail, right on top of a pizza coupon and a catalog for patio furniture. You're not going to open it? I asked. I'm manifesting positivity, she said, turning back to her smoothie bowl. If I acknowledge it, I give it power. We're ignoring it until our own lawyer gets back from vacation next week. I looked at David. He was staring at the envelope, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. He wanted to open it. I could see the fear in his eyes, but he was too terrified of his wife to reach for it. David? I said. He looked up, startled. I'm going to trim the roses in the back, I said. Will you help me? Just for 10 minutes, like we used to. Jessica shot him a warning look. We have the Zoom call in 20 minutes, babe. I'll be quick, David mumbled. He stood up and followed me out the back door. The garden was quiet. The morning glow sign was still lying under the tarp, a shamed monument. We walked to the rose bushes, the ones Martha had pruned every Sunday. I picked up the shears and handed them to David. Do you remember why your mother planted these? I asked. David looked at the shears, then at the bush. Dad, please, I don't want a history lesson. She planted them because they have thorns, I said. She used to say that beautiful things need to know how to defend themselves. David sighed, dropping his hands. What's your point, Dad? My point is that you are standing in the middle of a disaster, David. Jessica destroyed the Wisteria. She has triggered a legal mechanism that you cannot ignore away. That envelope on the counter, it's the end. I stepped closer to him. I looked into his eyes, searching for the boy who used to cry when he stepped on a snail. This is your last chance, I said, my voice low and urgent. Go inside, open that letter, read it, and then pack your bags and get Jessica out of here before the sheriff arrives. If you leave voluntarily today, I can stop the lawsuit for the damages. I can convince the board to let you walk away clean. David laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. The sheriff? He shook his head. Dad, you're losing it. Nobody is coming to arrest us over a plant. Jessica is right, you're just old. You're obsessed with the past because you have no future. He handed the shears back to me. We're not going anywhere, this is my house. And if you keep threatening us, we're going to have to look into other living arrangements for you. Maybe a facility. The words hung in the air, cold and final. He wasn't just choosing his wife. He was threatening to put me in a home. He was threatening to lock me away so he could enjoy his theft in peace. I took the shears back. I didn't feel angry anymore. The rage had evaporated, replaced by a deep, icy resolve. I see, I said. I understand perfectly, David. Good, he said, checking his watch. I have to go. The lighting is best at noon. He turned and walked back into the house, leaving me alone with the roses. I looked at the house. I saw Jessica in the kitchen window, setting up her ring light. She was preparing to broadcast her life to the world. She didn't know it, but she was about to broadcast her downfall. I took out my phone and sent a text to Arthur. They refused to open the notice. Proceed with the nuclear option. Arthur replied instantly. The sheriff is en route. ETA 20 minutes. I clipped a dead bloom from the rose bush and placed it in my pocket. Then I walked around to the front of the house and sat on the bench by the driveway. I wanted a front row seat. 20 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the long, gravel driveway, followed by a black sedan I recognized immediately. It was Arthur Sterling's car. I stood up from the bench, brushing a stray rose petal from my trousers. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a heavy, dull sadness. It didn't have to end this way. I had given David every off-ramp, every chance to turn the car around. He had chosen to drive off the cliff. I walked to the front door and opened it for them. Sheriff Miller was a large man who had known me for years. He took off his hat as he approached. I'm sorry it came to this, Thomas, he said quietly. We got the writ from the judge this morning. It's out of my hands now, Sheriff, I said. They are in the kitchen. Arthur stepped out of the sedan, clutching a thick file folder. He nodded to me, his face grim. He wasn't here as a friend today. He was here as the executioner of the trust. We walked down the hallway. I could hear Jessica's voice, high and breathy, echoing from the kitchen. And guys, I am so excited to show you the new layout. We're thinking of doing a total open concept vibe here, knocking out this wall to bring in more light. She was live streaming. We stepped into the kitchen. The scene was almost comical. Jessica was propped up against the island, her phone held high on a tripod, the ring light casting a halo in her eyes. Stan and Brenda were in the background, awkwardly pretending to read magazines. David was sitting at the table, his head in his hands. Jessica saw us first. Her smile didn't drop. It just froze. Oh, she said to the camera, laughing nervously. It looks like we have some visitors. Maybe it's the design team. She turned to us, hissing under her breath. Who are you? I'm live. Get out of the frame. Sheriff Miller stepped forward, his boots heavy on the hardwood floor. He didn't care about the frame. He walked right into the shot. Jessica Vance? He asked, his voice booming. Jessica scrambled to grab her phone, but she fumbled it. The tripod wobbled but stayed upright. The camera was still rolling. The world was still watching. Yes? Who are you? You're interrupting my broadcast. I am Sheriff Miller. This is Mr. Sterling, the attorney for the Vance Heritage Trust. Jessica rolled her eyes, glancing at the comments rolling in on her screen. Ugh, guys, sorry. Just some local drama. We're handling it. She turned to the sheriff. Look, whatever ticket you have, just leave it on the table. We're busy. Arthur stepped forward. He placed the thick file on the island, right next to her smoothie bowl. This isn't a ticket, Mrs. Vance, Arthur said, his voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. This is an order of immediate eviction. The room went silent. Even Stan stopped chewing his toast. Jessica laughed. It was a high, brittle sound. Eviction? Are you insane? My husband owns this house. She pointed at David. David, tell them. David stood up slowly. He looked at the sheriff, then at Arthur, then at me. He looked like a man waking up from a long coma. Dad? He whispered. I stayed near the doorway. I didn't step into the kitchen. I didn't want to be part of her show. Arthur opened the file. Your husband does not own this house, Arthur stated calmly. The house is owned by the Vance Heritage Trust. Thomas Vance is the life tenant. You, David, are merely a beneficiary with conditional residency rights. Arthur pulled out a photo, the picture Mr. Blackwood had taken of the mangled wisteria stump. He held it up. And yesterday, you violated the primary condition of that residency. You committed willful destruction of a key heritage asset. Jessica scoffed, grabbing the photo. The plant? You're kicking us out over a dead plant? This is a joke. The internet is going to laugh at you. She looked at her phone screen. But the comments weren't laughing at us. I could see the text scrolling fast. Wait, did she cut down a heritage tree? Is that the sheriff? OMG, is she getting evicted live? Arthur ignored the phone. He looked at David. Under the terms of the trust, specifically Clause 12.c, your right to occupy the premises has been revoked, effective immediately. You are now trespassing. David's face went white. But where are we supposed to go? That is not the trust's concern, Arthur said. However, there is a second matter. He pulled out another document. This one had a red cover. The destruction of the wisteria caused structural damage to the Victorian brickwork. The trust has received a preliminary estimate for restoration. He slid the paper across the island. You are being sued for damages in the amount of $82,000. Since you are no longer residents, this debt is personal. We will be seeking a lien on your assets, your car, your accounts, and your business earnings until the debt is paid. Jessica picked up the paper. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. $80,000? She screeched. I don't have $80,000. Then I suggest you get a lawyer, Arthur said, and I suggest you stop filming. Everything you say is currently being recorded as evidence of your admission of guilt. Jessica looked at the phone. She looked at the number of viewers. It had skyrocketed. People love a train wreck. She lunged for the phone and killed the stream. The room plunged into a sudden, heavy silence. She turned on David. You said we owned it, she screamed, hitting him in the chest. You said he was just a placeholder. You said the old man was senile. David caught her wrist. He pushed her away. Shut up, Jessica, he said. His voice was quiet, but it silenced her instantly. He turned to me. He walked across the kitchen until he was standing 3 feet away. Dad, he said, you can't do this. It's me. It's David. I looked at him. I looked at the son I had raised. I gave you a chance, David, I said softly. I told you to open the letter. I told you to fix the vine. I told you that beautiful things have thorns. I didn't think you'd actually... You didn't think I would protect Martha's memory? I asked. You thought I would let you erase her? I pointed to the door. You threatened to put me in a home, David. You stood there in the garden and told me I had no future. Well, I do have a future. I have a garden to restore, and you have a lawsuit to answer. Sheriff Miller stepped forward. Folks, I need you to vacate the premises. You can take your personal essentials, clothes, toiletries, everything else stays until the lawyers sort out the inventory. The trust owns the furniture. Stan stood up, his face red. Now hold on a minute. We have rights. We've been here for weeks. That's tenancy. Your guests, the sheriff said, and looking at this report, you're unwelcome ones. You have 10 minutes to pack a bag, or I escort you out in what you're wearing. The next 10 minutes were a blur of chaos. Jessica was crying, shoving makeup into a designer duffel bag. Stan was arguing with the sheriff about his cooler. Brenda was trying to catch the dog. I stood in the hallway watching them. It was like watching a fever break. The infection was leaving the body. David was the last to come down the stairs. He was carrying a small suitcase. He stopped in front of me. Dad, please, he said, his voice cracking. Where are we going to go? Jessica's credit cards are maxed out for the launch. We don't have cash for a hotel. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a $20 bill. I held it out to him. It's a beautiful day, David, I said. Maybe you can go to the park. He stared at the money. He didn't take it. The sheriff opened the front door. Let's go, folks. They walked out. Jessica was sobbing, hiding her face from the neighbors who had gathered on the sidewalk. Stan and Brenda looked shell-shocked. David walked with his head down, a man whose entire world had just been revealed as a mirage. The sheriff closed the door behind them. The silence that rushed back into the house was immediate. It wasn't empty silence. It was peaceful. It was the sound of the house taking a deep breath. Arthur sighed, closing his file. Well, he said, that was dramatic. It was necessary, I said. Arthur looked at me. What now, Thomas? I looked through the window. I saw David's car pulling out of the driveway. I saw the morning glow sign still lying in the dirt. Now, I said, we get to work. I walked to the kitchen. I picked up the household management agreement that Jessica had left on the table. I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. Then I walked to the back door and stepped out onto the terrace. The contractors were gone. The influencers were gone. The noise was gone. I walked over to the stump of the wisteria. It was ugly, a jagged wound in the earth. But as I knelt down, I saw something. Deep in the soil, protected by the thick bark of the root ball, there was a tiny flash of green. A sucker. A new shoot no bigger than my thumb, pushing up through the sawdust. It wasn't dead. It had just gone underground to survive. I touched the green shoot gently. Hello, Martha, I whispered. The silence of the house in the weeks following the eviction was not empty. It was heavy with a sense of restoration. It felt like a fever had broken. The air, once thick with the scent of Jessica's oat milk lattes and the tension of her constant demands, now smelled of beeswax, lemon oil, and old paper. I spent the first month simply reclaiming the space. I moved my clothes back into the master bedroom. I opened the windows to let the cross breeze blow through the hallways. I hired a stonemason, a true craftsman, not one of Jessica's fast and cheap contractors, to repair the Victorian brickwork on the south wall. It took time. The scars on the house were deep, but they were healing. 3 months later, the gate buzzer rang. I was in the kitchen reading the morning paper. I knew who it was before I even looked at the monitor. I had been expecting this visit. I walked to the intercom on the wall. The grainy black and white camera showed a man standing in the rain. He looked thinner. His coat was wet, and he wasn't wearing a tie. It was David. I pressed the talk button. Hello, David, I said. Dad? His voice was tinny, distorted by the speaker in the wind. Can I come in? It's pouring out here. I didn't press the buzzer. I just watched him on the small screen. Jessica left, Dad, he said, wiping rain from his eyes. She went back to her parents. She blamed me for the debt. She said I tricked her into marrying a nobody. I listened. I felt a pang of sorrow, sharp and familiar in my chest. No father wants to see his son broken, but I also remembered the way he had looked at me at the funeral. I remembered him standing by while she cut the vine. I remembered him threatening to put me away. "I'm sorry to hear that, David," I said. I need a place to stay, Dad, just for a while, until I get back on my feet. The lawsuit, they froze my accounts. I can't make rent on an apartment." He looked up at the camera, his eyes pleading. "Please, I'm your son." I looked at the kitchen table where he had sat and watched Jessica mock me. I looked at the basement door where he had sent me to sleep. "You are my son, David," I said softly, "and because I love you, I cannot let you in." "What? Dad, please." "If I open this gate," I said, "I rob you of the lesson. You stood by and watched my life be dismantled because it was easier than fighting. Now you have to fight for your own life. You have to rebuild it from the ground up, without a safety net, without an inheritance to lean on." "But I have nowhere to go," he cried. "You have your health, David. You have a degree I paid for. You have the same 24 hours in a day that I have." I paused, my hand hovering over the button. "Martha didn't write that protocol to punish you, David. She wrote it to save the house. But in the end, I think she saved you too. She cut you off so you would finally have to grow your own roots." I released the button. "Dad? Dad!" I turned the volume down. I watched him stand there for another minute, shouting at the silent plastic box. Then, shoulders slumped, he turned and walked away into the rain. I didn't feel guilty. I felt a strange, quiet peace. I had finally done the hardest thing a parent can do. I had stopped enabling him. 1 year later, I stood on the south terrace, a mug of tea in my hand. The spring sun was warm on my face. The brickwork was restored, the mortar seamless and strong. And there, climbing the trellis, was the wisteria. It wasn't the massive, cascading waterfall it had been. It was young. The vines were thin, green, and eager, but they were strong. The root ball, which had survived the chainsaw, had pushed up new life with a ferocity that amazed me. It was blooming. Small, pale purple clusters hung in the air, scenting the wind with that sweet, nostalgic perfume I remembered so well. It was different than before. It was smaller, but it was alive. I sat on the bench, the one Martha and I used to share, and watched a bee land on a flower. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. The house was safe. The legacy was secure. And somewhere out there, David was working a job in a hardware store, living in a small studio apartment, and paying off his debt dollar by dollar. I had heard he was dating a nice girl, a nurse, who didn't care about social media. I smiled. "We did it, Martha," I whispered to the wind. The roots held. The soulful outro. You know, we often think of love as a soft thing. We think of it as hugs and yeses and open doors. But sometimes the deepest form of love is a wall. Sometimes the only way to protect the people and the places we cherish is to say no. Martha knew that. She knew that a garden without a fence gets trampled. She knew that a legacy without protection gets sold for parts. She didn't leave me that red binder because she was angry. She left it because she knew that kindness without strength is just permission to be used. Thomas had to learn that the hard way. He had to learn that you can't save someone who is actively holding the match to burn your house down. He had to realize that his duty wasn't just to his son, but to the memory of his wife and to his own dignity. I think a lot of us are like Thomas. We hold our tongues. We move to the basement. We let the people we love chip away at us because we are afraid of losing them. But the truth is, if you have to lose your dignity to keep a relationship, that relationship is already gone. Have you ever had to close the gate on someone you loved? Have you ever had to stand your ground and protect your own wisteria, the thing that matters most to you, even if it meant being called the villain? I'd love to hear your story. Tell me in the comments below about a time you had to say no to save yourself. Your courage might be the exact thing someone else needs to read today to find their own strength. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. We share stories of emotional justice, of quiet revenge, and of the resilience of the human spirit. And remember, the roots of truth run deep. No matter how hard someone tries to cut them down, if the foundation is strong, they will always, always grow back. Until next time, take care of your garden.